Order. I will call Lisa Smart to move the motion. I'll then call the Minister to respond. There will not be an opportunity, I'm afraid, for the member in charge to wind up, as is the convention for 30-minute debates. Lisa Smart to move the motion.
Thank you very much, Chair. I beg to move that the House has considered government support for community theatre, and it really is a pleasure to bring this debate today with you in the Chair, Sir Jeremy. Community theatres across the country empower young people and enable them to find and amplify their voices. It's also wonderful fun to be part of the audience. I'm going to make the case for community theatres to be treated as an asset and one that saves money for our communities. I'm also going to make the case for those community theatres to be able to access capital funding to keep the show on the road. And because of the important role local councils play supporting community theatre, I'm going to make the case for sustainable funding for local government. In my own Hazel Grove constituency, the Forum Theatre in Romilly provides enriching opportunities to many young people from different backgrounds, including those who would otherwise not naturally feel able to get involved with the arts, as well as those with physical or learning disabilities. And I've had the very great pleasure of attending a whole range of performances at the theatre. The standard of production is extraordinarily high, and it's especially uplifting to see the progression of some of the young people moving from the chorus to a leading role, and then, for a few, to some of the country's top drama schools.
We don't really give way.
I will happily give way.
Yeah. Can I commend the Honourable Lady for Hazel Grove for bringing this forward? And I spoke to the Honourable Lady beforehand. We're all very fortunate. I'm very fortunate to have the Webb Theatre in Newton Ards as a local theatre. It gives people the opportunities that the Honourable Lady has referred to. Does she agree with me? It binds people together. And yet, with the escalation of costs, it's getting harder for theatres to keep the lights on. So does the Honourable Lady not further agree that arts funding has been put in the back burner for far too long, and it's now time to put it back so that the community theatre space can be at the forefront of this regeneration and rejuvenation of what the Honourable Lady very clearly wants to have? Thank you.
Well, I'm grateful to the Honourable Gentleman for his intervention. I obviously agree with him about the important role that community theatres play within our communities, the importance of that clarity on longer-term funding. I'll make some comments. And as he rightly says, some of the increasing costs that these theatres are facing. When energy bills go up for us heating our homes, they go up significantly more for theatres. And as I'll come on to, some of the capital spending that is needed really puts at risk some of this community cohesion work that theatre can really do. And the theatre in my own constituency, the Forum Theatre, faces an uncertain future because it's got rack in the roof. It was forced to close while temporary repairs were made, and it was repaired with a temporary lifespan of 5 years after a phenomenal campaign by the local community and local councillors pushed the local council to provide some funding. The theatre is thankfully back open, and it's back at the heart of the Romilly community. Last April, the estimates for the cost of the work to fully remove the rack panels at the Forum and deliver a permanent fix was forecast to be up to £2 million. The work involves removing the current roof coverings, removing each of the rack panels individually and disposing of them, then creating a new roof structure, making it watertight. And although this work would disrupt activities at the theatre, it is crucial to securing the long-term future of this beloved community asset. The Forum Theatre is owned by Stockport Council, and we all in this room know that there is a crisis in local government funding. And local councils across the country, including my own Stockport Council, are having to deal with severe budgetary constraints. Simply put, Stockport Council does not have the funds for the necessary building renovations at the Forum Theatre to permanently remove the rack. And undoubtedly, any money invested in local councils to support our cultural landmarks is money well spent and will pay dividends.
On that point, would my friend give way?
I will happily give way.
Thank you. I thank my honourable friend for giving way. Does she agree with me that had previous Conservative governments valued community theatres, like Clare Hall and the Martletts Hall in my constituency of Mid-Sussex, my constituents would still be enjoying all the benefits that arts and social spaces provide, and our council wouldn't be facing the invidious choice between non-viable community spaces and entirely commercially led offers that simply can't put the performing arts front and centre while staying financially afloat.
So my honourable friend makes a really powerful point about the perilous state of local government finances and the knock-on impact that has for the assets and the services provided by councils, and also the way that councils can support some of that really important work that goes on in our community that's quite difficult to measure the impact of bringing people together. I always feel that we look at the arts as a cost rather than as an asset and as a way of actually reducing costs in other areas. And I'll come on in some of my remarks to make some of those points. The forum also serves as a hub for over 30 local organisations. There's dance schools, community groups, bands, comedians and schools use the space. And they rely heavily on the forum for their events because it's an affordable space rather than going into town and paying the price for city centre venues. And its usage is a testament to both its importance and its significance. The level of activity it sees not only enriches the cultural life of my constituents and much more widely, but it also stimulates the local economy. A study by the Society of London Theatre shows that for every £1 spent on a theatre ticket, £1.40 is spent on the local economy. This boost is vital for the many independent shops and cafes, and indeed wine bars in Romilly, who benefit from the theatre's bustling schedule. But at the centre of these statistics are the real lives of those in my community who benefit from the forum. The theatre brings together children and young people from different backgrounds, from those who are more affluent to those who are currently living in the care of the local authority. And at the theatre, they grow together with shared passions. I will give way.
I thank the Honourable Lady for bringing this debate. The Forum Theatre in her constituency sounds like a venue you'll have to put on my to-visit list because she's making such a great pitch for it. And I'm very lucky in my constituency to have the Rep Theatre, the Mitchell Arts Centre, the work that Restoke do at Fenton Town Hall, and the Dipping House, which is a community venue running high-profile performances. But what those venues also do is not only bring opportunities for local people to engage in the arts, but also to hear their own stories reflected back by seeing the stories of our community played out on stage. And would she agree with me that those sorts of stories are often overlooked by national production companies, and if we do away with the community theatres, we end up losing our own history to what is commercially viable nationally?
No, I strongly agree with the point that the Honourable Gentleman makes, and I remember growing up with this accent and really welcoming it when somebody sounded like me on the BBC or somebody sounded like me in a theatre production. And I think it matters to all of us that we can see ourselves, we can hear ourselves, and we can hear our stories being told. And I think community theatre plays a hugely important role in that, and local theatre plays a hugely important role in that. It also plays a really important role, I think, in saving the public purse money. So we've got so many young people waiting for an assessment, waiting for treatment. They're on a CAMS, Children and Adolescent Mental Health Services waiting list. They might be out of mainstream school. They might be struggling as they're living with some sort of mental health condition. And participating in the life of a theatre, whether it's in a production, front of house or back of house, can really make people feel like they belong. It can help them find their voice, and it can really support them, thereby reducing the cost to the state in other areas. And I think it also offers invaluable education opportunities. At the Forum, local schools benefit from theatre experience days where students can learn about career opportunities in the creative industries, and this can be life-changing. I'm thinking of an example of David, who discovered his passion for lighting and sound design during a school visit. And when he left school, he became the theatre's very first apprentice, allowing him to master his passion over a 2-year programme. NK Theatre Arts, the charity which operates the theatre, also ensures that financial hardship doesn't prevent participation. And the theatre vowed never to turn down a potential member due to financial difficulties. Recently, a long-time member of a much-loved drama class stopped attending because her family was experiencing a tough time financially, and they decided they could no longer afford it. But the theatre team pushed through and insisted that the member continue and only pay what she could.
Will the Honourable Friend give way?
I will happily give way.
I thank my Honourable Friend for giving way, and her passion for our own local theatre is really clear to see. You mentioned about the form of ownership of the theatre, charity in this case. In Carshalton, we have the Crier Arts Centre, which is a local theatre owned and operated by the local community. The company was specifically set up for that purpose. Would you agree with me that this type of ownership structure should be encouraged by the government and supported as much as possible?
Yeah, I'm grateful to my honourable friend for his intervention. I strongly agree that the assets that are owned and run by the community are a really powerful way of empowering that community to deliver what it needs. The Forum Theatre is owned by the council but is run by NK Theatre Arts, and I'll come on to how that, some of the challenges that funding model presents, but I think communities being involved in improving their communities is the best way to bring about the best for a community.
Will my honourable friend give way on that point?
I will, on that point.
As my honourable friend knows, I'm a keen supporter of the arts, especially community theatre. So will my honourable friend join me in congratulating Chichester Community Development Trust, who have managed to secure National Lottery funding, which will redevelop a part of the former hospital at Graylingwell and create a community hub that will be used as a rehearsal space for creatives and for community theatres in the Chichester area. But will she also agree with me that sustainable funding going forward, once that creative hub is up and running, is going to be key to making sure it's there for future generations?
No, I'd certainly join with her in congratulating the team in her constituency. Having participated in some bids for lottery funding, I know it's not always an easy process. And so they've done very well to have success there. I also know that community hubs that are so much more than just a rehearsal space, they bring light to a community, they bring laughter to a community, and they bring so much warmth. And so I absolutely agree with her comments in that regard. All honourable members will know that theatres are facing higher and higher running costs. If we think about the impact of higher energy bills on households, the cost of heating a very large high-ceilinged space costs even more. Its energy bills are increasing, rises in wages and national insurance for staff just means there's less and less money available to spend on improving things around and about the theatre. And I spoke to NK Theatre Arts, and they summarised my point perfectly. They said, and I quote, "Although it's great to put on a brilliant show, it isn't really about the shows and the events. It's all about the social benefits this brings to the children, young people and adults, all of our partners who use the Forum Theatre, but it needs investment. And this investment would be its lifeline." So I want to appeal to the Minister and to the Government to take action to support councils to maintain and renovate cultural buildings such as community theatres. The previous government provided schools and colleges with the funding that they needed, more or less, to permanently remove the rack. Considering the hugely important service that our cultural buildings provide and the amount they save the broader public purse, I think it just makes sense for the government to provide similar funding to remove rack from community theatres across the UK. Romiley Forum is, of course, not the only theatre in Hazel Grove. We also boast the Carver in Marple, which, while relying solely on volunteers, has been entertaining my community since 1906, and where I've enjoyed the unforgettable Marple Gang Show. And I shouldn't forget Romiley Little Theatre, another charity that's been part of Stockport's cultural landscape for over 70 years. Without our community theatres, the immensely valuable services that organisations like NK Theatre Arts provide to young people would not be able to exist. The workshops and experiences that the theatre company offers are not only accessible ways to get involved in the arts, these services also help keep young people off the streets and involved in their local communities. Any funding for community theatre would be investing in our young people. We would be investing in our local communities, and we would be investing in the UK's proud and storied cultural heritage, providing opportunities for the very many extraordinarily talented young people in our constituencies who may not otherwise be able to get involved with their passions. I'm asking government to support community theatre and treat community theatres like an asset which bring money into our communities while simultaneously saving money from the public purse, whether it's CAMS or for young people living with anxiety or day centres or other activities for those with learning disabilities. I'm also asking for government to make funding available for capital repairs for theatres like the Forum in Romiley, like the DFE did for schools and colleges, to give a secure future to these vital community assets. And, although I'm aware it might not be in the Minister's gift alone, I'm asking for local government to be given clarity over its long-term funding so that we don't lose the local connection to the arts that so many of us cherish.
Yeah. Thank the Honourable Lady, and I call the Minister, Sir Chris Bryant.
Thank you much, Sir Jeremy. It's very good to have you in the chair, not just because you know a thing or two about DCMS, having played a role there for a while. I congratulate the Honourable Member for Hazel Grove on securing the not only the commitment, but she got quite a large audience as well for her debate today, bigger than many audiences that I've seen in here. She's quite right, obviously, to refer to the Forum Theatre, which reopened after £300,000. She was a bit modest, if I might say, because I think she was one of the leading figures as a councillor campaigning for getting it reopened. And who knows, maybe it played a role in her getting elected to this place. She's smiling, so I think that's a sort of, it's not quite a Mona Lisa moment. It's a fairly, yes, I did. But and thank you very much, Minister, for mentioning it. I gather it reopened with, everyone's talking about Jamie, which was, I think, just for one night only. And it was a young lad playing the lead who had grown up entirely through the theatre there and had learned their craft there. So, I mean, that was yet another part of the aspect that you get with the community theatre, that you get young people engaged in the arts in a way. And sometimes these are people who wouldn't necessarily be interested in other academic subjects in school, but see that the creative industries are a career choice for them, option for them, and have a moment of extraordinary bravura on the stage. Or it might be somebody who works backstage and decides that's not going to be a career for them, but nonetheless it's given them a degree of confidence and a sense of working as part of a team. It's learning how to take a cue or prompt a cue and so on. All these aspects are part of growing up as a young person, and their skills, essential life skills for nearly every work environment, which is why I think the creative industries are so important. Both the creative industries where you've got a massive production of Matilda put on by the Royal Shakespeare Company, which then ends up becoming a worldwide success, or War Horse from the National Theatre, or Les Mis, originally an RSC production, or you're talking about much smaller venues as well, where the subsidy is a key aspect of managing to keep the thing alive. I should say, incidentally, that Dan Gillespie-Sells, I think, who's a friend of mine, wrote someone, everyone's talking about Jamie. So it's important, part of, as I'll come on to later, it's not just about buildings, it's also about having the writers and the musicians coming into the pipeline so that we've got future shows that people really want to see.
Thank you. I thank the Minister for giving way. I just want to take this opportunity to thank the Crew Reform musical players in my constituency for a fantastic production of SpongeBob SquarePants last week, which I enjoyed in the fantastic South Hill Park Theatre. And it was really the young people, seeing them on stage and the confidence that they were able to exude on stage that filled me with such hope for the future. So I just wanted to ask the Minister to expand a bit further on those benefits that being involved in theatre, in creative industries has for our young people.
I'm not sure that was a question at all, really. It was really an advert, but it would seem that all the world's a stage and all the MPs merely players, which is good that everybody appreciates the cultural institutions in their own constituencies, and we all try our best to support them whenever we possibly can. It's the Park and Dare is the theatre in my patch, a beautiful 19th century. I think one of the most exciting nights I ever had was seeing Joan Armour-Trading play there. And sometimes when you have some world-standing acts come to a local community, that's really important. I think Paul Young's playing at the Forum in a few weeks' time. He'll be living in the love of the common people, no doubt. Community theatre, however, we've all used this term in the debate, but it isn't really a term that exists. It's according to the Society of London Theatre and UK Theatre, it's roughly 50% of all the theatres in the UK. There's about 1,100 theatres, so maybe we're talking about 500 or so. I think this is all on a spectrum, really, isn't it? From the tiny venue that really only seats 100 people and is entirely run by the community on almost a voluntary basis, through to much bigger venues like Nottingham Playhouse, which run by the local authority, but it's very much part of the local community. And I would actually argue that no theatre is really a theatre unless it's a community theatre. Even many of the big things that we see in London's West End, which are such an enormous attraction for people around the world, and incidentally much better value, if anybody's watching this debate from the United States of America, much better value than Broadway, and much better quality. Whatever part of whatever kind of theatre you're talking about, I suppose, in the words of Peter Brook, in essence, it's an empty space, and it's only when somebody walks across it that it becomes theatre. But in order to do that, it's got to have a story to tell, it's got to have people to tell that story, and it's got to have an audience. And all of that is what turns it into a community. The theatre industry in the UK generates something like 2.39 billion in gross added value, 205,000 workers in it, turnover of 4.4 billion or so. And we do support, in many of the ways, actually, that the Honourable Member has asked us to do already, so I'm quite pleased I'm here today. She's asked these questions and she didn't ask me more difficult ones. The first thing is, obviously, the higher rate of theatre tax relief, which we've introduced, which comes into force on the 1st of April 2025, I think is a significant investment in the theatre industry across the whole of the UK. That's 40% for non-touring productions and 45% for touring productions and ones that involve music. The Arts Council England is going through its next round at the moment of looking at its National Portfolio Investment Programme, and that's something like £100 million a year going to 195 theatres across the UK. And whilst people might think that a lot of that is going to the big theatres who might not qualify in this concept of community theatres, actually, that's Stuff and Nonsense. No, sorry, that's the name of a theatre in Dorset. The Stuff and Nonsense Theatre is one of the Arts Council England national portfolio organisations, the Nottingham Playhouse, Z Arts in Manchester, Little Bulb Theatre in Mendip, Scratchwork Theatre in Exeter. And interestingly enough, it's not just theatre buildings, as I said, but also they fund the writing squad in Stockport, which is trying to bring on new writing talent in the north of England, because that's absolutely essential to making sure that there are new plays coming along. I mean, I love J.B. Priestley. I was in a production of Time and the Conways many, many years ago. One day I'll tell the embarrassing story of that. But you can't just endlessly put on the classics, much as many of the classics are really important. And I've seen productions of Richard II and Edward II and Hamlet in the last few weeks. Nonetheless, you need live, modern stories that reflect people's newer lived experiences. Of course.
Just on that point of funding, Leatherhead Theatre, a Grade 2 listed building, is leased by a small local charity and it faces ongoing maintenance challenges, but its ownership model makes covering these costs extremely difficult. So whilst the £85 million Creative Foundation Fund is welcome, past experience suggests that not owning the building or having a long-term lease could preclude access to this funding. Will the Minister look into ensuring that funding is accessible to all community theatres, regardless of ownership, to ensure that they continue enriching our communities?
Well, I mean, I like the way she casually dismisses the £85 million of capital investment that we... I mean, that took quite a lot of work to secure that money. And we did so. It was one of the first things that the Secretary of State and I were lobbied about when we came into government last July, was around the state of many of the cultural institutions, theatres and museums and galleries and so on, that have been run by local authorities which are in dire capital need. And many of the organisations that we're talking about will be covered by that. If she wants to write to me about the specifics of the case that she's got, I will look into it. We had to make some decisions about where our priorities should lie, and there are other avenues that other organisations can go down, but we wanted to make sure that there was a solid amount of money in a single year, 25-26, £85 million for capital projects for those the kind of theatres that many of us will be talking about that are or have been local authority run. So that's but as I say, if she writes to me about the specifics of her particular organisation, then I'm happy to look at that. The other thing, the other intervention that the Department for Culture, Media and Sport is engaged in, of course, is the Theatres Trust, which provides a great deal of advice on a very unbiased way to a whole variety of different theatres about their funding mechanism, about their legal structures, their governance, about what they can do about energy costs. I mean, a whole series of different things that they help with. And I'm very grateful to the team there at the Theatres Trust. They're an important part of making sure that this whole sector works. And I should make it clear that it's very easy for us to celebrate the big shows that I've already mentioned that are on in the West End, and Tom Hiddleston in As You Like It and so on. Or Much to Do, is it? I can't remember which it is. Anyway, all of those productions, all of these get lots of coverage, and they're very successful commercially. But you don't get a successful commercial theatre in the UK unless you also have a successful subsidised theatre industry in the UK. It's that whole mix. And when you think of an actress like Glenda Jackson, she ended up winning 2 Oscars, and she was nominated, I think, for 2 more. Great star of stage and screen and so on, made her way partly through theatre, but also in the movies. Her original, she started in rep in Hoylake and West Kirby. So we need to remember that it's that whole mix, even in the changing environment of modern theatre, where there are very few repertory theatres in the classic sense, that really we have to sustain. I've already referred to the £85 million Creative Foundations Fund, but I should also refer, because the Honourable Member for Hazel Grove referred to local government, and she's quite right, and that's why the new plan for neighbourhoods, which the Ministry for, I get the letters in the wrong order, for housing and local government, they are developing is precisely designed to look at how we can make sure that all our local neighbourhoods flourish. And a key aspect of that must be the creative industries and our cultural institutions. I mean, people take so much pride in having a local theatre or a local music venue or whatever it may be. And I think that we lose those organisations at our peril. Now, there are enormous challenges. Yes, of course.
Alison Bennett.
Thank the Minister for giving way. My concern is that in West Sussex we're on the fast track for local government reorganisation, and without a quick resolution to how we fund social care, actually many of these community theatres, which are council-owned assets, are at risk of being sold off. Would he press the MHCLG to that point, please?
Well, I've already had those conversations with them, and it's not simple, obviously, where you've got local government reorganisation. But to be honest, 14 years. I used to be a councillor in Hackney. I know the pressures that there always are on local government. But for the last 14 years, the pressures on local government have been so intense, both in terms of an ageing population taking a much greater proportion of funding through social care. And looking after children in care, but also very diminished budgets. And local authorities have really struggled to be able to do what they are required to do, let alone the things that they are allowed to do, such as provide culture and leisure facilities. Now, one of the problems there has been that they've tended to have annual settlements rather than 3-year settlements, and I really hope that this will make a dramatic difference to how local authorities can plan for big projects and for medium-sized projects in the cultural sphere. But I will always make the case to any local councillor who walks through the door that just cutting the local theatre or cutting the local leisure centre is an own goal. It means that you struggle to provide the other services that you want, you lose pride in your local place, you deprive people of career opportunities, and you make it more difficult to grow the local economy. Because we know that for every £1 that is spent on a theatre ticket or a live performance ticket, you're likely to spend several more on other things in the local community. Now, you're going to have to be very quick.
Another point that the Minister is making is that actually community theatres tend to solve the problems that drive demand in those acute and expensive services in the first place by giving people a social outlet.
Yeah, no, very good point. And indeed, I mean, one of the things that I've said regularly, and one of the other services that has suffered tremendously over the last 14 years is youth services. And actually, the combination of cultural services and youth services and leisure services, that whole congregation, if you can get them to work together in a local community, that can radically affect people's life chances and life choices. My final point is simply, Sir Jeremy, that it's not just about buildings. It's terribly easy to get obsessed about buildings. And actually, my concern is, are we getting the young actors that we need from every kind of background, or are we only getting them from one background? And that, I think, depends on making sure that every single school has a proper creative education.
Thank you very much, and that brings the curtain down on this debate. I am grateful to all who've participated. I haven't finished. Leading roles and walk-on parts. And the question is that this House has considered government support for community theatre. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. And to the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order. The sitting is suspended until 2:30 this afternoon.